Cristiano Ronaldo has won everything football can give a player. Except this. The one trophy that isn't in his cabinet. The one ghost that follows him into every interview, every retirement question, every greatest of all time debate. Now imagine, just imagine, the ball falls to him. One touch, one shot, one World Cup final winner's goal. What would that actually mean? Not just for him. For football history itself. Stay until the end, because we're about to break down exactly how close this dream has come to reality, and why it still haunts him. But before we go there, hit subscribe because we're about to rewrite football history, one what if at a time. Cristiano Ronaldo has won 5 Ballon d'Ors. 5 times he stood on a stage as the best player on the entire planet. He has lifted 5 Champions League trophies, more than almost anyone in the history of the sport. He won a European Championship with Portugal in 2016, dragging a nation that nobody believed in to glory, even after he himself was carried off the pitch in tears in the final. He added a Nations League title in 2019 for good measure. He has scored more international goals than any human being who has ever played this game. Over 130 goals for his country. A number so absurd that by the time most legends were closing their careers, Ronaldo was still breaking records that experts thought were untouchable. And yet, despite all of that, despite the medals, the records, the statues, the GOAT debates, there is one trophy that has never touched his hands. The World Cup. Let that sink in for a second. The single most prestigious trophy in football, the one that defines legacies more than any other, the one that turned Diego Maradona into a god in Argentina, the one that, in December 2022, finally found its way into Lionel Messi's hands after a final so dramatic it will be replayed for generations. That trophy has never been Ronaldo's, not once. Rewind to 2006. A young Ronaldo, just 21 years old, baby-faced, electric, dangerous. Portugal made it all the way to the semi-finals in Germany before falling to France. Heartbreak, but also hope. Surely this was just the beginning. Then come the years. 2010, round of 16. 2014. Group stage exit with Ronaldo visibly exhausted, his body breaking down in real time. 2018 in Russia, Portugal eliminated in the round of 16 by Uruguay. Ronaldo walking off the pitch with that unmistakable look, somewhere between fury and disbelief, and then 2022. Qatar. This was supposed to be it. Many assumed it would be his very last World Cup. And what happened instead became one of the most talked about controversies in tournament history. Ronaldo, the greatest goalscorer of his generation, was benched for Portugal's round of 16 match against Switzerland. His replacement, Gonçalo Ramos, scored a hat-trick. Portugal won 6-1 without him starting. Then came the quarterfinal against Morocco. Portugal lost 1-0, eliminated by a Moroccan side making history of their own. And there it was, the final image. Cristiano Ronaldo walking off a World Cup pitch in tears for what many believed was the last time. No World Cup, no final, no fairy tale ending. Just years of chasing a ghost that always slipped through his fingers at the very last moment. This is why the what if hits so hard. Because we're not talking about some random fantasy. We're talking about the single missing piece in the resume of arguably the most dedicated, most relentless competitor the sport has ever produced. A man who turned himself into a machine through sheer obsession, diet, training, recovery, mentality, purely to delay the only opponent he could never truly beat, time itself. So now, let's build the dream. Because if this is ever going to happen, even in our imagination, it has to happen now. Not in some distant fantasy. Right now in the 2026 World Cup, hosted across the United States, Mexico, and Canada. The first 48-team World Cup in history. The biggest stage football has ever built. And for Cristiano Ronaldo, at 41 years old, this would not just be another tournament. This would be the absolute final chapter. The very last dance, picture the build-up. Portugal somehow, against all odds, claws their way through the group stage. Then the round of 16. Then the quarterfinals. Each match feels heavier than the last, because everyone watching knows exactly what's at stake. Pundits stop talking about tactics and start talking about legacy. Commentators stop calling him Ronaldo and start calling him the man chasing history. Fans who have hated him for 2 decades quietly find themselves hoping he gets this one moment, then the semi-final. A moment so tense that entire stadiums fall into complete silence before erupting into chaos. Portugal somehow survive penalties, somehow find a way through, and suddenly, impossibly, they're there. The World Cup Final. Cristiano Ronaldo's first, and undoubtedly his last. This is where fact ends and pure imagination begins, because nobody knows what would actually happen on that pitch. But that's exactly what makes this story worth telling. Because somewhere between fact and fantasy, there's a version of this moment that every football fan on earth has imagined at least once. The stadium is packed beyond capacity. 80, 90,000 fans, flags from every corner of the world, a roar so loud it shakes the cameras filming from above. Portugal in their iconic red and green. The opposition, doesn't matter who. Doesn't matter the name on the other shirt. Because in this story, there's only one name that matters. The match begins and it's tight. Brutally tight. 90 minutes pass and the score is still goalless. The kind of final where every single touch feels like it could decide history. Extra time arrives. Legs are heavy. Lungs are burning. And somewhere on that pitch, a 41-year-old man who has spent over 2 decades chasing this exact moment refuses to slow down. The clock ticks past the 119th minute. One final attack. One cross swings into the box. And there he is. Right place. Right time. Just like always. But what happens next? That shocked everyone. That changed everything. And we are not skipping past it, because that moment deserves its own story entirely. Stay close, because next we step inside the goal that would rewrite football history forever. The cross swings in. High, arcing, dropping out of the floodlights like it's falling in slow motion. Time does something strange in moments like this. Players say it later, in interviews, in documentaries, in quiet conversations years afterward, that everything slows down. The crowd noise fades into a dull hum. The legs stop feeling tired. The mind goes completely perfectly silent. And in that silence, there's only the ball, the run, and 20 years of waiting. He times it. Of course he times it. This is the one thing he has done better than almost any human being who has ever played this sport, being in exactly the right place, at exactly the right moment, more times than should be statistically possible. The leap is explosive, almost violent, defying every conversation anyone has ever had about his age. The header, because in this story, let's say it's a header, the way so many of his greatest goals have been, connects with a sound that somehow cuts through 90,000 screaming fans. A clean, sharp, unmistakable strike. The goalkeeper dives. Full stretch. Fingertips reaching for something that's already gone. The ball kisses the underside of the crossbar and drops in. Not a screamer from 30 yards. Not a wonder strike that highlight reels obsess over for its technical brilliance. Just pure, instinctive, ruthless finishing. The exact same hunger that scored his very first professional goal over 2 decades earlier. Somehow still alive, somehow still burning. In a 41-year-old body that the entire football world assumed had nothing left to give. For half a second, there's nothing. No sound, no movement. Just stillness, the kind that exists right before chaos. The kind of silence where even the player who scored hasn't fully processed what just happened. And then it breaks. The eruption isn't just noise, it's something closer to a shockwave. 90,000 voices detonating at once. Portuguese flags swallowing entire sections of the stadium. Grown men in their 60s who watched this same player score his first international goal back in 2004, suddenly crying like children. Commentators losing all composure, screaming his name over and over into microphones that were never built to handle that kind of emotion. And Ronaldo himself? In this imagined moment, he doesn't even celebrate right away. He just stands there, frozen, staring at nothing. Because some moments are too big for instant reaction. The body needs a second to catch up with what the heart already knows. Then it happens. That explosion of raw, uncontrollable emotion the world has seen from him before, but never quite like this. Arms out, veins visible in his neck, screaming something into the night sky that no microphone could ever properly capture. His teammates reach him first. A pile of bodies, shirts, sweat, and tears. The kind of celebration that looks more like survivors finding each other after something violent and overwhelming than footballers celebrating a goal. Somewhere in that pile, you can picture the younger players on the team. Men who grew up idolizing him, who had posters of him on their bedroom walls as children, now living inside the exact fantasy they used to act out in their backyards. And then, in this imagined version of the story, there's a moment of stillness again. Ronaldo pulls away from the pile. He looks up, not at the crowd. Not at the cameras. Just up, toward the sky, the way he has done after so many of his biggest goals throughout his career. A quiet, private gesture dedicated to his late father, José Dini Severo, the man who never got to see even a fraction of what his son became. In real life, Ronaldo has spoken about this connection many times, the weight of playing for someone who isn't there to see it. In this imagined moment, that gesture carries more meaning than it ever has before. The final whistle eventually comes. Portugal World Cup champions. Cristiano Ronaldo, at long last, complete. Now, let's step back into reality for a second, because this is the part of the story that actually matters most. This goal never happened. This final never happened. This is and remains pure imagination, a what-if built from genuine football logic, real timelines, and real emotional stakes, but not an actual event. It's important to separate that clearly, because what makes this story so powerful isn't pretending it's real. It's understanding exactly why so many fans, analysts, and even rival supporters have spent years imagining this exact scenario. Because here's the real question this entire video has been building toward. If this had actually happened, what would it have meant for football's greatest ongoing debate? To understand that, we have to talk about December 18th, 2022. A real date. A real final. A real moment that changed everything for the player long considered. Ronaldo's biggest rival, Lionel Messi, that World Cup. Final in Qatar is already regarded by many as the greatest final in the tournament's history. Argentina versus France. Messi scoring twice. Mbappe responding with a stunning hat trick of his own. The match going to extra time, then penalties, in a finish so dramatic that even neutral fans were left emotionally drained by the end of it. Messi lifted the trophy that night, finally completing the one achievement that had eluded him for his entire career. It didn't just add a medal to his collection, it fundamentally changed how an entire generation of fans talked about him. Before that night, critics could point to the missing World Cup as the one gap in his legacy. After that night, that argument disappeared completely. This is exactly why the Ronaldo what-if carries so much emotional weight. Because fans have already watched this exact transformation happen in real life, just to the other side of football's greatest modern rivalry. They watched, in real time, what a World Cup win does to a legacy conversation. They watched the debate shift overnight. And ever since that moment, there's been an unavoidable question hanging over Ronaldo's career. What if he got his version of that night? In real terms, Cristiano Ronaldo's resume does not need a World Cup to be considered historically great. The numbers alone make that argument completely unnecessary. Over 900 career goals across his professional career, 5 Champions League titles, 5 Ballon d'Or, a European Championship win with his country, the all-time leading goal scorer in men's international football history, a record that may never be broken. He has already cemented himself as one of the most statistically dominant players the sport has ever produced, regardless of what happens with international tournaments. But football, unlike most other sports, has never been purely about statistics. It's about stories, moments, symbolism. And the World Cup carries a kind of mythological weight that no club competition can fully replicate. Because it's not about money, transfers, or club power. It's about country, identity, and history that stretches back generations. This is why, even with everything Ronaldo has already achieved, that missing World Cup remains the single most discussed gap in his entire legacy. Not because his career needs it to be considered great, but because football fans by nature are obsessed with complete stories, with full circles, with endings that match the size of the journey that came before them, and that's exactly why this hypothetical hits so hard. Because it's not really about a fictional goal and a fictional final, it's about what that moment would represent. 2 decades of relentless obsession, countless setbacks, 2006, 2010, 2014, 2018, Tororo, each one chipping away a little more at the dream. Each one making the idea of a World Cup feel further and further away. A player who reinvented his body, his diet, his mentality, purely to delay the inevitable decline that catches every athlete eventually. A man who, even past 40 years old, was still being talked about as a difference maker on the biggest stages in football. If that imagined goal had actually happened, if Cristiano Ronaldo really had scored the winning goal in a World Cup final, it wouldn't just have completed his trophy cabinet. It would have completed his story, the full circle. The same kind of emotional ending fans witnessed with Messi in 2022, just from the other side of one of sport's greatest rivalries, and maybe that's exactly why this what-if refuses to go away. Why football fans across the world, Portuguese, Brazilian, English, Argentine, it doesn't matter, still find themselves imagining this exact scenario. Still find themselves wondering what the world would have looked like if, just once, the ball had fallen to him at exactly the right moment, on exactly the right night, on the only stage that ever truly eluded him. We'll never know for certain how that story would have ended. The real chapters of Ronaldo's World Cup journey have already been written. 2006's heartbreak in Germany, the early exits that followed, and finally that gut-wrenching final image from Qatar in 2022, walking off the pitch in tears, the weight of every what-if pressing down on him in real time. But maybe that's the whole point of stories like this one. Not to rewrite history, not to pretend something happened that never did, but to understand, just a little more deeply, exactly what was at stake every single time he stepped onto that field wearing his country's shirt, to understand why millions of fans, even now, still hold on to the smallest sliver of hope that somewhere, somehow, this story isn't completely finished yet. So here's the real question we'll leave you with. Not whether this scenario could have happened, because we already know, factually, that it didn't, but whether, given everything Cristiano Ronaldo has already accomplished across more than 2 decades at the very top of this sport, he even needs a World Cup to be remembered as one of the greatest to ever play the game. Drop your answer in the comments. Tell us where you stand. And if this story made you feel something, even for a moment, make sure you're subscribed because we're just getting started. There are more legends, more legacies, and more what-ifs waiting to be told. And trust us, you do not want to miss what's coming next.